Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Laura Van Daken with the AIMS marketing team, and I'm going to be your host during the webinar. I'd like to welcome you all to today's webcast, Creating a Supply Chain Center of Excellence. Now, before we get started, I'm going to cover a few housekeeping details, and then I'm going to introduce our presenters. Your phone lines will be muted during the presentation, so please use the chat function in the GoToMeeting control panel to communicate with me or with the presenters throughout the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we'll take as many questions as time allows. You can submit your questions using the chat function or save them for the end. Today's webinar is about 60 minutes long, and at the end you'll see a very short survey pop up. We would appreciate any feedback that you have. And a recording of the webcast and the slides will be emailed to you, so if you miss something, you can always view it later. It's my pleasure today to welcome our presenters, Chris Gordon and Herjan DeLong. Chris has worked in supply chain consulting and operations across Europe, the US, and India for over 25 years. He's worked on many supply chain initiatives with a focus on using analytics to promote business transformation. Herjan has been working with leading companies, partners, and universities around the world. He also works closely with research organizations like Gartner, as well as our sales, support, and R&D teams. He has over 2 decades of experience in prescriptive analytics space. In today's webinar, we're going to dive into the following. We want to share some tools and ideas to get you started. And so we'll get into why is the Center of Excellence for Supply Chain Analytics valuable, basic supply chain analytics, Center of Excellence design choices, what types of applications, functional areas can I address, where, how to get started, what technology you can use, how to deploy in a short amount of time, and then we'll get into some recommendations at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Good morning. So the first question we'll address is, why will a supply chain analytics center of excellence prove valuable to your business, and why now? And there's several reasons. The first being growth. So if you consider that Walmart has grown 500 times since 1980, and Apple, even in just the last 10 years, is 20 times the size it was. And in addition to this, if you think about the complexity of the supply chain and these businesses, so we do a lot of work with retail and CPG, and we see a lot of retailers with over 100,000 SKUs in their business across multiple channels. And they're not really just managing the sourcing and the outbound of these products, they've also got to manage returns. So returns through a whole series of channels. And they're trying to do this while retaining margin. Add to that global expansion. So the global expansion, and obviously there's local preferences with that. And all of this business complexity has been coupled with the biggest growth of all, which is really data. So increasingly complex businesses and data that's much more available from every direction. And the question we hear a lot of people say is, well, what am I to do with all this data? And what are my competitors doing with it? And there's a kind of an inherent fear there that competition's doing more with this data and more with analytics, if you like, and supply chain than you might be if you've not started. And we're very fortunate that we see many applications across our client base. We see hundreds of applications. And I think it's a very much a valid fear, because we see organizations out there that are doing incredibly clever things, and they're doing them very quickly. So there's a couple of things to consider that with this change and with this more focus on analytics is you've really got to move from, if you look at the chart, from tribal knowledge and relying mostly exclusively on very experienced operators to really enhancing that by adding in data supported decisions that are going to drive proven value and business prescriptions. prescriptive analytics, where the highest value sits. And we see organizations out there that can do this in a very robust and scalable way. So next we look at some of Gartner's viewpoint. So the first chart, the top chart there is the PACE model. And PACE model breaks up technology as a system of record, which is typically ERP, systems of differentiation and systems of innovation. Now we find with when we look out there and we look at regular supply chain centers of excellence without much focus on analytics, what we find is that 99% of the effort of a regular supply chain center of excellence is really focused on implementing ERP. And while we're big fans of ERP, ERP is extremely well suited as a system of record. It's really poorly suited as a system of differentiation. And then from the other side, from systems of innovation, we see a lot of organizations that are doing some very clever stuff with Excel. But it's really challenging because Excel as a business solution can be very fragile. So we see this big squeeze here, and actually instead of trying to push ERP up and Excel down into systems of innovation and differentiation, we see analytics as a very good fit to take care of this area. And if we now go a little deeper with the bottom chart, so we look at analytics and we look at the 4 different components of analytics. We've got descriptive, which is really a record of what occurred, diagnostic of why did it happen, then predictive, which is obviously very important within supply chain for forecasting what will happen, and in fact that's really what might happen. And then we focus in on what we believe is the real sweet spot of analytics, which is prescriptive analytics. So if it happens, what am I to do? And when it happens, what am I to do? And the reason it's a real sweet spot is because it's the only area that really focuses on recommended action and leads to direct action within the business. A question that we get asked a lot is, if I'm interested in analytics, do I need to go sequentially through these different blocks before I get to prescriptive? But actually it's our view that prescriptive is not the hardest area, it's the area with the most value, but we find organizations and work with organizations that implement within prescriptive very quickly. So if you're interested in this, there are 4 basic models to a supply chain analytics center of excellence. The first one being a very simple centralized team. You've got all the talent in one place. It's a model that we favor because there's collective learning in that area. Then there's a distributed team, which should be, analytics individuals, supply chain individuals distributed throughout the business. Typically, we see that it's really a result of dysfunction, and it's often that there's a lot of different analytics teams, but actually they're not able to collaborate as well as they could. Then you see internal outsources, and we see a lot of this, and we see this term a lot, which is enterprise analytics group. And often that's run by IT, and it's often a very strong team. And typically what we see, though, is these groups are focused on descriptive. And the 4th model is external outsourcing to a service provider. And we see some of this often doing kind of base low-level stuff. But there's also some examples of where that's worked extremely well, for example, with dunnhumby and Kroger, something you might want to look at. So it appears that you would choose one of these 4 models before you would go ahead. But in fact, when we look out there and we look across our client base, and we consider, at least I consider that oil is kind of really the leaders in this area. What you actually see is it's typically a hybrid. So you've got one centralized team, and then you've probably got a little bit of all the other models as well. So I'm interested in a supply chain analytics center of excellence. So what type of applications should I build? Where should I start out? And we're very fortunate because late last year we did a survey of our client base, and we were fortunate enough to get a very good view of the hundreds of applications out there that our clients have deployed. And by far the biggest area of deployment is within planning teams. And the real sweet spot there is in supply chain planning, in supply planning. So there's a lot of focus on sales and operations planning, integrated business planning out there in the market. And there's a lot of capability out there already with other technologies and with talent where demand management can be forecast, reasonably well. The gap that we see there is the supply management side of sales and operations planning. And we've had many clients implement really good solutions very quickly that focus their applications on the supply side. So you can have a demand plan, and then, what about if you've got 5% uplift or 10% uplift or a 5% decrease in Europe or something like this. And supply planning with prescriptive analytics is very well suited to those kind of scenarios. Manufacturing, we're seeing an increasing amount of applications built in manufacturing. And we've got one client that works in heavy industrial that's got a lot of pressure on from imports. And they've got to compete, and they've got to compete well. And the path they chose is with prescriptive analytics, and it was really to build applications that allow them to use their assets and people in a world-class way, and they're very successful with that. Pricing, fairly complex to build, and we see a few applications out there. What's really, the key flag for pricing is that the benefits by applying prescriptive analytics to pricing, they're just huge. They're really massive revenue-based benefits. And logistics, transportation and logistics teams. So people have been using our technologies and similar technologies for, decades around network modeling. Then I guess over the last decade, we've seen organizations like Llamasoft that have been very successful at providing pre-built network models that you can populate and get a result. Now what we're finding in the market is you've got a lot of organizations that have got a lot of benefit out of Llamasoft, but their supply chains have outgrown from a complexity perspective, so they're not able to solve their network challenges with Llamasoft. And we're seeing a lot of clients out there that are now taking it to the next level and building applications that are more sophisticated than that and able to get a very specific solution, a very tailored solution to their challenges. And finally, sourcing, which is a very easy application to build, and frankly, it's surprised we don't see more organizations using this kind of approach in the sourcing space. So there's a lot of pressure on. So with all this pressure on, how can I build a supply chain analytics center of excellence? Where do I start? So the first thing is, typically these organizations, and maybe your organization, you're bogged down in implementations. So prior to coming to Ames, I worked with one of the large West Coast high techs, and they had a simple challenge, which was to embed supply chain segmentation into their system of record, which was SAP. And, we spent well in excess of $10 million implementing segmentation into SAP. It was slow. It took more than a year. And as you can see, it cost a lot of money. And it's really, the challenge there wasn't the solution, it was really the technology that was being used. ERP, or the system of record, was really being stretched into the system of differentiation. And if you use the right tooling, then you're talking about, costs that are significantly less than 10% of the cost. And you're able to finish very, very, very quickly, probably in 8 to 10 weeks for an initiative like that. We also hear a lot, we go to a lot of conferences, we hear supply chain executives talk about the lack of talent. There's not enough talent in the supply chain and available for these kind of center of excellence initiatives. But I think it's really important to consider it's not just the volume of talent and how much is out there. It's really changed, and people need much more of an analytical approach to do that. So we're going to get very specific, and we're going to talk about the kind of skills that you need to do this. And the model that we've used here is this Center of Excellence Pyramid, which is really focused around analytics because that's our business. And the foundation of all of this is really business understanding and functional leadership. You can't get stuff done without that knowledge. And what we find is, and personally what I've experienced is, having spent a couple of decades in consulting, is increasingly organizations know what they want to do, and they know how they want to do it, and they can describe it from a functional perspective. So it's very important to include those in the pyramid. The next thing is training and change. So what you're talking about here is organizations that are able to build applications very quickly that have a big impact on the business and the way they do business. And it's important to implement correctly and include the training, and obviously really recognize the change that comes with major business changes within your organization. The third layer, and this is important, is really the IT component. Supply Chain Analytics Center of Excellence, not an excuse to have build a competing organization that competes with your own internal IT. Sustainability means that IT needs to be part of this team. And IT can add a lot of value. So the first area is on data stewardship. So don't just give me data, let's have a data strategy. There's a lot of reuse of data in supply chain centers of excellence. And UX leadership. So we notice that all of the clients that we have, they want to consume insight in a very different way. And it's important that the user experience is really tailored to the organization. And the top layer there, I'm going to hand over to you, Gert-Jan, to talk a little more about the top layer.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, so the top layer states the operations research group. And as Chris was already mentioning, the prescriptive analytics, I think that's exactly the space where the operations research group is in. But it's a special group that allows you to build these models that give you the recommended action and that high impactful business results. But I mention it, and we mention it operations research because it's still that skill that's being recognized within the universities. And we talk about linear programming, mixed integer programming, that might not necessarily be familiar to you, but it's something that allows you to very easily identify these analytical people that allows you to build these recommended action models and not just the predictive or the descriptive models. And if you want to source those, and I think it's important, and you just see a free little puppet there on the side. Typically the group is not very large, but it's a very high impactful group. And we see different ways of people organizing that, as Chris was already mentioning it. We see in-house development as a very key development with a larger organization, have the skills and the understanding of already what's out there. They've seen prescriptive analytics before. But we also see a lot of people start small. They might work with partners that we have, strategic partners like Booz Allen Hamilton, ATK, A.T. Kearney, Boston Consulting Group. But there are also specialized partners like Orstek or Districon that are very specifically active in an industry. And they could help you start it up and get an understanding. And what you tend to see then, once they see the results of these impactful models, is that people realize that beyond having the 3 layers already below that, they want to also form their own groups, their own group of prescriptive analytics people. And they tend to find even a hybrid version between partners and themselves, and by that learning slowly into getting these new insights. So if you look at the recruitment side, and maybe many are not familiar with that, but there's a big organization called Informs in the US. It has more than 12,000 members, and it offers 2 different conferences. One of them is a technical conference in the fall that's coming up next month, and one of them is a business conference. And the nice thing about this conference is that it really caters to all these different layers of the pyramid we just showed. It recognizes the business side, the impactfulness, the ability to add value, and to understand that models are not just models for analytical people, but they really have to get into the hands of end users. But they also recognize the deep technical skills that are out there. And there's so much changing in the world every day with artificial intelligence, machine learning, new ideas about operations research. What can we add to our business to become even better and change the status quo? And in fact, we ourselves are also a member of the Round Table of Informs, and that's a very interesting organization for many I think businesses that want to really advance is because the roundtables allow you to have executive level support, where you have peer-to-peer group discussions, which could be about talent recognition, about knowledge sharing, about insight in specific businesses, or maybe cross-business references. All these type of things are available. So there are many, many ways you can go there. So if you have a chance to go to such a conference, specifically in the US, these ones, I think they're very valuable for you. But of course, they're not only here. They're also in Europe, Asia, but you also have more industry-focused conferences like the AICHE, which is the chemical engineering folks. Also, they have a prescriptive analytics operations research arena. And the same with IEEE, it's electrical engineering conferences. And in all these type of conferences, if you go there, you will find different ways, different inspirational ways to start using technology and start using this type of formats. Of course, we also want to help these people, help these centers of excellence to become successful. And we have a tool set, AIMS. It's a prescriptive analytics tool set. I just want to show you a few highlights there. What for us is very important, that it should be very easy to model. Once you have an idea, when you form the center of excellence, you have a problem coming out of the business, what can you do with it? It should be easy to model. It should be flexible and fit for purpose. Chris gave some nice examples where people get almost like stuck at the glass ceiling and they want to go further than that, but they also want to make sure that once they do it, people understand it. So we have a glass box approach, as we call it. Very logically, here on the right side, you see a model. Everybody can read this model. It will give you the insight of what you're trying to achieve. And here you see a transport optimization model, minimization of total cost, and you have some cost deliverables and all that type of stuff. And it's very easy for anybody without any mathematical or R knowledge to dive in and understand what's going on. Furthermore, you want to gain direct insights of the results. Once you start trying these things out, you want to show people what you're actually doing. You want to show good graphs, you want to be interactive with it, and it should be easy to use for everybody within the organization, because it should not stick with the analytical person or the OR person alone. You want to make sure you connect with the business people to get an understanding of what's actually being modeled. And leadership needs to know what's really driving now the business in the next stage. Further on, it needs to be collaborative, we believe. You're not alone in your organization. There will be many around you that do the same type of problem. They could be regional oriented. They could be a group of people doing the same type of scheduling. So you need to be able to collaborate and to scale up whatever you're doing, because you want to invest in something that is not just solely for one purpose. You want to bring it further into your organization and benefit recommended actions everywhere. Furthermore, it has to be easy to integrate. You are in an enterprise environment, in a business environment. You need to connect with your data. You want to maybe use your mobile devices, all type of stuff. So it needs to be easy to integrate and therefore also easy to deploy. So everybody can get very easy access to the technology that's out there, to the solution that you're creating, and give feedback on the solutions in case you might see something new and you want to adapt and change. And of course, most important, or maybe not most important, but it's very important, it needs to deliver the business value. If it doesn't deliver business value, it needs to go away and you need to build something else or do something else. And what I believe is very important, it needs to stimulate innovation. Chris was talking about these base layers. One of them was the differentiation layer, the other was the innovation layer. I believe it's great to differentiate, and you really need to do that, but you also want to have a platform that allows you to go even a step further. Because what's the next step you're doing? And you can look at each other and say, well, this is where I'm different, but here's where I really make the next step. If you have a platform, you have the people and the organization that allows you to really make those steps, you're really going to be very successful. So in all, what we're looking, if we look at our business, is we want to bring the benefits throughout the whole organization. And having the organization, having the technology, and having the knowledge on how to build quick apps, you know, you really have a rocking platform, a rocking organization that allows you to very quickly build new applications, bring optimization to any device in every corner, and bring rapid value to the end user. I think that's very, very key. End users are craving for results, and we see a lot of end users already, they are scrambling to get a planning in place using maybe Excel or something else, and they're happy if they have at least a result so they can move on. If you can bring them very quickly apps that will support their decision making and make it easy for them to get the results, you'll be very successful, and they can think about the next question they want to answer, and you can add new value to the business as well. So with that, I want to turn it back to Chris.
Okay. Thanks, Kaya-chan. So we see a lot of organizations, they become very interested in prescriptive analytics. And and setting up a center of excellence, and they're somewhat intimidated as where to start. But fortunately, we've been through this cycle many times with prospects and with clients. So we know that the first place to start is just get right on with it and build your first high impact application. And this POC process is what we put forward. It's worked. It's a proven methodology. It's worked well for us and our clients. And what you start off with is a conceptual design. And it's a very simple document. We'll show you a couple of examples of that in a moment. And then with a 2-day workshop, you bring the team together and you build a functional design with the team that then gets built into technology in front of the team, and then it becomes kind of hardened out there through testing, through data integration, etc. And a couple of examples of how successful this process is. We worked with a transportation company recently, and they'd struggled for a number of years. They had a big maintenance operation, several maintenance operations. And they struggled for many years to further increase efficiencies within that group. They tried various technologies, and actually with a POC within a couple of days, within 2 days specifically, we were together building an application, and by the end of the second day, the application was already being used in anger and to make business decisions. And those business decisions improved efficiency within the operation, and also importantly, it improved the balance for the workers in the operation. The individuals that were doing the maintenance, they had better shift patterns, which were more sociable and more suited to them. You know, another example of this is an organization, a manufacturing organization that had spent 18 months trying to implement sales and operations within their business. Trying to integrate that with SAP, and they were just using the wrong tool, and they became frustrated. They were about to give up, and they thought that they gave us a call and thought they'd give prescriptive analytics a shot. And once again, within 2 days, we together with them built an application, and that application was very powerful. And by the end of the second day, they were making pretty big business decisions on how they wanted to manage their demand. And what we see is a very impressive speed to build with these applications. We see typically between 2 and 8 weeks to build an application and deploy it in the business. And our most successful clients continue around this process. So every time they've got an initiative, they'll continue with this POC approach. And our most advanced clients really have moved into quarterly releases of multiple applications. So here we'll just take a very quick look at 2 conceptual designs, and I'm not going to read them, but hopefully it gives you a flavor of that. And if you want to be successful in this, you really need to sit down, and within 30 minutes you should be able to write a very basic design of what you're trying to achieve from a conceptual design. And the higher level, the better. So it really needs to focus in very much on what the goal is. Of the many POCs that we've done, what we see is a lot of success when these are kept very high level. We also worked with a couple of companies, and I'll take a healthcare company as an example, where the conceptual design was just too detailed. I mean, it was pages and pages of, you know, very sound conceptual design. But the challenge there is what you lose with that is if one individual puts together a conceptual design and it's very detailed, you've lost the ability to bring the group together and together build something that everyone believes in. So if we look at the POC workshop itself, then you can see the team there. It's the team that was discussed with the COE Pyramid. Everybody's got a place at that table. And it's really about consuming the conceptual design that's produced prior to this 2-day event. And then really fleshing it out on a whiteboard. So we've not seen a solution that doesn't fit on a whiteboard yet. And it's really about using the functional knowledge that exists within the team and building out that functional design. And the great thing about this is there's great transparency. So everyone in the room really understands how this design's built up. There's no kind of black box. It's all understood. And then what's really cool is beginning the second half of the afternoon of the first day, we open up AIMS and we take that functional design, and in front of the team we build an application. And the application's already running scenarios by the second day, and it's being used within the business by the second day. Of course, the application's going to need hardening off over a number of weeks, but it's just great to be able to get something that's ready to use within a couple of days. And we see the fact that the app's built, the functional design is built in front of the team, and it's really, the technology is really a glass box. What it means is that the adoption is really incredible. And it's much faster to build, and it's much faster to implement as well. The last thing we're going to do here, and we won't go into detail with this, is, but we just thought we'd share with you a little more detail around what a functional design is that's built on the whiteboard. And the key here is what you see there as a formulation. It's really the goal. What are you trying to achieve as a business, as a supply chain? And then, you know, it's built around, from a functional perspective, it's based on demand. It's based on, you know, products, physical or not, discrete or process. And then it's really based on the infrastructure that exists within your business. And that's functional design here is enough to build a very complex application, a very successful application as well. So, Gertjan, I'm going to hand over to you to give a bit more insight into the technology.
All right, thank you, Chris. Yeah, what I would like to do is just give you a little flavor of the technology, what is really going out there now. And I want to do that by opening, it's called the Supply Chain App Store. It's a number of examples. I'm probably going to highlight 2 of them today. But it's a production example where I have to deliver from a production line into the warehouses to fulfill demand. It's a sourcing application where I want to optimize my suppliers using all kinds of volume discount brackets. And there's a warehouse analysis example. And before we go in, it's good to maybe state that these examples you will see will all drive in the web. They're all interactive. And I think that's a very important thing to have. It allows you to do all kinds of scenario analysis. I'm not going to show it with all, just want to highlight a few. But they're also built just in a few days. This is not like months and months of work. This is based, again, on a whiteboard, like Chris was showing you, building up the first model and adding some graphics to it, working with the end users to see what they want to see. So let me open this App Store here for you. So I'm logging into our AIMS Pro portal. And here I have my 3 examples that you just saw before. What I can do is just right here, I can open up the application. And then we'll see my first overview of what I'm actually going to do here. So it's connecting right now, the system. Always scary with live demos, but you never know. I can load some input. What you see here, I see a number of plants, a number of warehouses. The warehouses have certain inputs, so let me go through that here. There's various demand for various products in the warehouse that are being produced by the different plants. The production, of course, has certain capability, different production units, certain time, labor available on the production lines that they have. There's a label cost to it, and there's a production line labor time required. How much time do I need to build a pound of this good that I have to create? So it's all fairly simple, but already what you see here, there's a lot of information. And if you would do this in an Excel spreadsheet or do it somewhere else, it's going to be pretty complex, specifically because what we want to do, we want to optimize and understand the best results and not just a result. So what I have here, I have an optimization tab, and the optimization tab, I already optimized this one before, but this optimization tab shows the actual cost, transportation cost, and the labor cost of my current solution. And what I can do after that, I can dive into various results, or even here, as an end user, I can just look and say, well, you know, I don't really like it like that. Give me a table. I want to get a little bit more details. So I can flip it back and forth the way I like to. So I get these overviews in the way that I see them fit and can make the best analysis of the data. So in fact, what we're doing a little bit here, we're doing some diagnostic analytics and some descriptive analytics because we see the results. So let's look a little bit deeper into results. I see production data here. Of course, it's much more subtly. I can dive in all these results. But what I also can do, I can do a comparison, and here it becomes interesting. So what I can do, I can say, well, I have my one solution. That's all great. But what I see here, and let's not go into all details, but here I see my Chicago plant is running at 600,000 of the capacity, and that's exactly the maximum capacity that it has. So apparently, if I would grow the Chicago stage here, maybe I would have a better solution. So what I could do, for example, I could say, well, let me save this scenario. Let's call it scenario 1. And what I could do, I could say, well, I'm going to change this setting. Let's make it 800,000 for Chicago and see what will happen with it. And if I re-optimize that, I would get different results, of course. You see the cost changing a little bit, but still I don't really know what's happening here because I just see this one result. So what I could do as well, let's go on to scenario 2. And what I can start doing now, I can start comparing these two cases with each other. And now it becomes interesting because now I see both cases, labor rate are the same. I see a difference here in capacity, but I see the difference here in cost. And in fact, what happens here, the total cost decreases if I increase the capacity of Chicago. So apparently it's cheap for Chicago to have more capacity, which in fact tells you your network is constrained. So this is an example of how you could, for example, use this application. Of course, there's much more you can do with this application, but it gives you a little bit of a feel. And of course, there's all kinds of different insights I can have here. And whatever you like, you can flip it around. You can group it differently, look at the results in a different way. So it gives you, again, the ability to dive in, and again, on multiple scenarios. So you can have 2, 3, 4, 5 different scenarios, and it allows you to be very flexible on that. But this is just one example. Another example, people always like to see this as well, because, you know, if you want to visualize something, it's great to do it in tables, but what's even better if you can visualize on a network. So here I have a network of customers and suppliers. And what I can do here, I can select the number of warehouses. I have 10 warehouses, they're all here. I can decide what happens if I have 8 warehouses, how would I distribute to my customers? And I can optimize this, and here you see the actual optimization in place. And you see the end result of the optimization telling you would have 2.7 million in cost. You would use these 8 warehouses, you would use 8 warehouses, and then I can start diving in like I did before. I can look at the inputs, I can look at the results. I can even do a cost to serve analysis and say, okay, how much does it cost? Product 1 going to Luquilo or to Rainsport. I can get these insights as well, and I can start changing data. Like I did before, I can have a scenario tab, and I can decide, you know what, I want to change some of the scenarios and start comparing those. I won't do that here, but it gives you a flavor of what you could do. And again, that's very powerful because it allows you to get a good insight of your analysis. What's interesting about this case, because many of the people who already understand prescriptive analytics or optimization, they would never probably say, well, why would I say 8 warehouses? Let the system figure it out. Well, what happens a lot of time when people start using these type of technologies, they first want to almost like repeat what they're used to do. And typically what a lot of people do, they say, well, let's see what happened with 6, 7, 8, 9 warehouses and start comparing those, comparing the results. Well, once you have prescriptive analytics and the modeling capabilities, I can, of course, make this part of the model and tell the system, you know, find me the best number of warehouses. It's not in this system, but it is a way I could extend the model when people start working with it. And that's how you can augment, adapt, and change. Well, let's not go into the details. I'm just looking a little bit at the time as well. But this is another example. It's a sourcing model, which is very interesting. And the sourcing model, and Chris was saying us before that we saw only like, I think it was 3% on the slide, people using it for sourcing. And sourcing is about how can I use my discount brackets from my suppliers to better do my buy-ins. And I can have volume discount, bracket discounts, all kinds of discounts. And this allows the procurement organization to maybe negotiate with the suppliers to do it in a different way. And it's interesting, we've seen quite some activity here. And this is a quite complex one because I have a bracket discount where I can say if between so much and so much you get this discount. I have a bundle. If you have a combination of different products, you get a discount. Or if you even go beyond a certain dollar volume or euro volume, you even get more discount. And suddenly you see already if I have these 3 different discounts and have to start matching those, it's going to be very, very hard to do it anywhere. But this system is fairly easy to build it up. And you can even turn it on and off and then using it as a negotiation principle. Seeing this, and Chris was mentioning about complex models, from an Inks perspective, it's not so complex to build those. And in fact, we do even see that this is already a little bit more complex than most people would like to solve. They're already happy if they can solve 1 or 2 layers of discounts and use that. So very quickly, you can already start implementing these models into your system. So I think that gives you a little bit of flavor of the technology about some of the applications. There are many more out there, and of course we can show you more of that as well, but I think we leave that for the next time. So let's go back to this. We also have a lot of cases online. You can go there, and the interesting thing about these cases, and the beauty I think about prescriptive analytics in general, is we don't discriminate on the type of industry or type of usage. There's so many things you can optimize. Although you see it specifically a lot in the oil and gas, chemical, retail, logistics area, because typically you deal with large assets, big decisions you have to make. There's a lot of finance involved, of course. But we also see people doing rostering. We even had a schooling system deciding where to position the kids in the next class, so they have a good mix, fit well with a good teacher, and all that type of stuff, which is very interesting if you think of that. If you really bring benefits to the society, to the organization, it's not necessarily dollar value, it's also happiness of school kids or happiness of school. So there's a lot of things you can do. And we have some videos out there. One of them are Erle Keith, who's doing profit optimization worldwide in the supply chain. And Nampec, the bottom one, a glass company in South Africa, and what they're doing is sales and operation planning, and they are now able to, first of all, understand what the production should be, but also whenever they get a call of a special order or a change in demand, they can deal with it. They understand the implication. They understand maybe the effect, positively or negatively, if they make some changes in the production planning. I think these type of things are very, very valuable. And Chris mentioned as well, a lot of Excel is being used, and the interesting part about these two situations, they used to use Excel for that, and they outgrown it. It was too complex, or it was managed by one or two people, and nobody could understand the business rules behind it. If you can separate the business rules, have a professional system around it, you can really excel out after that. So we also decided to write down a few characteristics of our successful customers, and I think it's interesting to see that, and it's maybe also something for you to look at yourself and look at your organization. Our typical clients are very authentic and ambitious people, and what we mean with that is authentic is, you know, they really almost like say what it is. They really want to look at the facts. They want to understand what things go wrong and things go right, and use that knowledge to move on and to become better. They're not very political typically, which is good because you need to really drive something in an organization that's very different from what people are used to. But they're also very ambitious. They really want to do something new. They want to grow the organization. They want to grow the unit they're in. And if you do have that drive, you're willing to take up new stuff and adopt new technologies. Of course, I want to drive improvement. That goes without saying, I think. If you don't want to drive improvement, you know, why would you do it? It's more like keeping the status quo, and that's what we don't see. And we see typically leadership stepping up here. And the other thing what's important is people recognize the opportunities offered by new technology. And we've talked to organizations where they say, well, we just have our standards, but we still want to do this stuff. That's a very tough discussion. Because it's very hard to have and use your current technology while you're feeling stuck to find in that technology things you want to change, because otherwise you probably would have already changed it. So what's out there in the world, and things are moving so fast, what's out there in the world that can really help you? And are you willing to adopt that? Are you willing to maybe even fight the fight with IT and bring them inside and make them part of the solution by changing the organization, changing the technology, changing the skills that you have inside? And a very important one as well is that typically our successful customers have a responsibility for a core process. It's not a theoretical exercise. They really drive the P&L. They really want to add value. They're able to invest. They're able to move on from that. So I think that brings us close to the end of the presentation. And I want to stop with a few key recommendations in the next step. The word has been mentioned a few times, prescriptive analytics. And I know for some it's a new term. For others it's not a new term, but they're still trying to find out what it is. Please take the time to understand what it is and how it fits in your organization. And you can, of course, talk to us as well about that. Because it's good to position it well so you can be successful. Look also at your people, at the skills in your organization. If you want to drive in POC, well, as Chris was mentioning, you need quite some different skills. And we know they're out there, but find these people that will allow you to be successful in that. And if you don't have them, try to see how you can fill them in with either external support, with us or somebody else. Be sure to do your homework on support technology. What do you have inside? What do you see in the market? And we showed you a little bit how Ames could help you, because that gives you a good indication of how you want to move along. And of course, use a proof of concept methodology. And I think what's important is to start that and to continue it. I think it's great, and we see that sometimes happening. People have an idea, they want to start it up, they do it one time, they're successful, and then it dies out, the group disappears. I think this is a continuum. This is something you have to keep doing and doing and doing. I think updating continuously what you're doing, whether it's inside the application that you already built, but the world around you is changing. You will have new challenges. Your end users are asking new things. Your business leaders are asking new things to tackle. So make sure you keep a system in place that allows you to continue to look at this proof of concept methodology, allows you to build up new applications, find out new ideas, maybe even classify them in most promising, least promising. That brings you to the next one. If you do start with high impact and easy apps. And easy apps, of course, it doesn't mean, it's a problem you already solved, but there are a lot of things out there that you're still struggling because they're in Excel, you don't know exactly what to do, but they can very easily be ported in a technology like Ames. Typically are in supply chain planning because that's where heavy assets are. Already very quickly, as we showed in the examples, it can be complex even, or at least the problems could be complex because there's a lot of things at stake. There's a lot of different identifiers or data points or decisions you need to make. You want to manage those. And once you have done that, you can start scaling back on that, scaling up on that success. So suppose you're interested in engaging with us on supporting a POC, and we'd love to do that, of course. And what we typically do in these things, we start testing your conceptual design on a fit, which is important. And that's typically a conversation we have together, trying to find out what you're trying to achieve and how we could support that. And it allows you to go into a POC with a good problem, what everybody can have a clear understanding of, clear goals, clear success criteria, and move on from there. The other thing you need to do is have to ensure you have the right stakeholders on board. And Chris has mentioned in the slides before, but it should not just be a theoretical exercise. What if we had this, then we might be able to do something. Now it's good to have somebody on board that says, I want to solve this problem. I can put some budget together. If we are successful in this POC, we can move on to the next. Because what you want to do, you want to drive change. You want to drive improvement. You don't want to have a situation where you say, well, we could do something, and that's great, but we don't really act on it. And of course, you can reach out to us. Important to know, we typically schedule POCs 5 to 6 weeks out. And depending, of course, on the demand, it's important to make sure we have everybody on the table. But we're looking forward to having you reach out to us and talk about this.
Thanks, Gert-Jan, and hopefully this gave you some things to think about. And now we come to the Q&A portion of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them now. And I'll ask Chris or Gert-Jan. Just go ahead and use the questions tab in the GoToMeeting control panel. And we have a few questions. The first one is, what does POC stand for?
Yeah, POC, it's a proof of concept. So, and the principle, as we talked about, is how do you prove the application out in 2 days?
Okay, another question. Can you please say a word or two about the optimization model behind the technology?
The optimization model behind the technology, and I assume this is about the demos. Or is it?
I think so. It doesn't say.
Okay, so maybe what I can say something about it. I'm just going to interpret the question right now. So the technology behind the models, it's Ames-based technology, and Ames has a number of layers. One of the layers is the modeling layer, in which you put business rules. One of the layers is the data layer. So we extract data from database. We have an internal data management system. It could be Excel, it could be text, all kinds of format, or your UI, as you saw before. I can change data if I want to. Then there's an algorithmic layer. So we connect with a set of optimization solvers, like you have CPLAX in a linear programming space, or you have CONOP in a nonlinear space, and there's a whole set of these applications, algorithms out there, and we could connect and combine those algorithms to make you have optimization models. So we invoke that through the modeling system. And then the fourth layer is the deployment layer, which you saw as an app store. It's where we have the visualization together with the model and the data and the algorithms. We really bring it to the end user to allow you to interact, change it, deploy it over the organization. I think these are the four most important layers. What we do also see is, of course, some forecasting libraries are inside the technology. You can even build your own libraries. We see some of the more technical capable organizations say, well, you know what, I already have some kind of heuristic solution that I want to invoke into the models, and you can bring it in as what we call a function, and that function becomes a part of the whole model.
All right, thanks, John. So the next one, Chris, I'll give that one to you. What's the average cost of a POC?
Mm-hmm. So POC, so what we really like to see is a good problem that fits. So something that with a high degree of confidence we know is a problem that we can solve together. Really what we're looking for from an aim side is we want the right problem, and we want to see considerable commitment from the organization that we're teaming up to do the POC with. So the biggest cost, the major cost for you is really getting that team together with commitment and time to, fill that room, put the people around the table with time to deliver the POC.
Right, the next one is to build the model, it appears that we need input data, but from my experience, it's difficult to get input data, especially related to the data for the future, like demand in the future, etc. So how do you solve that? Or how have you seen customers solve that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a very challenging question as well. And in fact, if going back to the POC format, so one of the things that we say in the POC in preparation, we want to make sure that people either have the data. That's why this one of the stakeholders on the table was an IT data person, or that he can get the data in some format or another. We do realize that not always all data is available. So you need to maybe do some analytics on it. You maybe need to create some random data for it, but still within a certain realm. You can use forecasting libraries to say, well, I'm going to determine that, because in the end, you need to get some data, of course, to get started. We do realize, of course, if the data is very, very off from what you have, the question is, will such a POC be ever successful? Because you're dealing with data that's not your data, so it's going to be very tough. So if you don't have it in order, you will have a problem there. But we do also see that a lot of times people need less data than they think. Sometimes it's a feeling that we need all data available before we can do anything. And I don't believe it's true, and we don't see that other people believe that's true. Because a lot of times the business people know very well what the type of data is. I hope that answers the question a little bit. But we can have also more discussions offline, by the way, if somebody wants to go in deeper.
Yeah, I think we want to make sure we get everyone out in time and can't get to everyone's questions, but we'll be able to get back to you offline with answers to your questions. So thank you for all of those. We really had quite a few come in. So I just wanted to share some additional resources for those of you interested in prescriptive analytics, and we'll be sending out these slides for you, so you'll have all the links in there, so you could watch some videos, or we have some additional reading here. And really just wanted to thank our presenters today and all of you for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed the information presented. And as I said, we'll be sending you the slides and a link to the video. So if you missed anything, you'll be able to watch all of that again. And of course, feel free to reach out to us. If you have any questions, I have Chris and Gertjan's direct information here. This month, we're also featuring the Gartner Hype Cycle for Chief Supply Chain Officers that has a section in there about prescriptive analytics, its importance and its impact. And if you click on the link in the slides that you'll be receiving, you'll be able to get a free copy of that. And if you're interested in learning more about proof of concept methodology, again, feel free to reach out, and we'll be at the Informs conference in Nashville that Gertjan mentioned. So if you happen to be going there, please drop by our booth. We'd love to chat with you in person. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Just wanted to remind you again that at the end of the webinar, you're going to see a survey with a few questions. We'd love to hear from you and what you thought about this webinar. Thank you again. Have a good day.